Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked on the alien control panel. The massive space station stretched around him like a metal city floating in the void. Strange lights blinked in patterns he did not understand. Twisted metal. Corridors led to rooms filled with equipment that looked nothing like human technology. The air tasted different here, thick and metallic, but his suit systems said it was safe to breathe. He had been part of the exploration team from the starship Horizon for 3 weeks now. Captain Lisa Barnes had picked him personally for this mission because he was the best engineer in the fleet. The alien station orbited a dead planet in the Vega system, silent and dark when they first found it. Now Jake stood deep inside its engineering section, trying to figure out how the massive structure worked. The station was huge beyond belief. It could house 1 million people easily. The walls were made of some kind of living metal that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Cables that looked more like vines ran along the ceiling. Everything here followed rules that human science did not know. Yet somehow Jake felt like he was starting to understand small pieces of how it all fit together. His radio crackled too. "Morrison, report your status," came Captain Barnes's voice. "Still working on the power distribution system," Jake replied. "This technology is incredible. The way they channel energy through these crystal matrices is completely different from anything we've seen. I think I'm close to bringing some sections back online. Good work. Keep at it, but stay alert. Something doesn't feel right about this place." Jake had felt it too. The station was not truly empty. Sometimes he heard sounds in the distance like machinery starting up on its own. Lights would flicker in sections where no one was working. It was as if the station was slowly waking up after a long sleep. He turned back to the control panel, running his scanner over the alien symbols. His translation computer was making progress, but slowly. The language was unlike anything in human databases. Still, patterns were emerging. The aliens who built this place thought differently than humans, but they were engineers just like him. They solved problems and built things that worked. A sudden alarm echoed through the station. Jake's blood went cold as he recognized the sound. Enemy ships approaching. The exploration team had found evidence that this station belonged to a race called the Zephyrians, who had vanished long ago. But apparently, someone else claimed this territory now. "All teams, emergency evacuation." Captain Barnes's voice cut through the static. "Hostile vessels detected. Return to the horizon immediately. This is not a drill." Jake gathered his equipment quickly. The nearest transport point was 3 levels up and half a kilometer away through the winding corridors. He ran toward the exit, his boots echoing on the strange metal floors. Behind him, the alien machinery hummed louder as if responding to the emergency. The station shook as weapons fire erupted outside. Through a viewing port, Jake saw sleek black ships attacking the horizon. The human vessel was fighting back, but it was outnumbered. Explosions lit up the darkness of space in brief, terrible flashes. Jake reached a transport tube that could carry him quickly to the docking bay. But as he stepped inside, the station shuddered violently. Something had hit it directly. The transport system went dead, leaving him trapped between levels. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as power systems failed throughout the section. He tried his radio again. "Captain Barnes, this is Morrison. I'm trapped in transport tube 7. The system is down." Static answered him. Then, faintly, he heard her voice. "Jake, we're taking heavy damage. The enemy ships are focusing on us. We have to jump out now or we'll lose the ship." "Wait," Jake called back. "Give me 5 minutes. I can get to the backup transport system." "Negative. There's no time." "I'm sorry, Jake. We'll come back for you." The radio went silent. Through the transport tube's small window, Jake watched the horizon's engines flare bright blue. The ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving him alone on the alien station. The attacking ships followed it, disappearing into the darkness between stars. Jake sat in the dead transport tube for a long time, processing what had happened. He was stranded on a station the size of a city, with no way to contact human space. His suit had maybe 6 hours of air left. The station's life support systems were failing throughout most sections. The temperature was dropping as power grids shut down one by one. But Jake Morrison was not the kind of man who gave up easily. He was an engineer, and engineers solved problems. He had studied this station for weeks. He knew more about its systems than any other human alive. If anyone could survive here, it was him. He forced the transport tube doors open and climbed out into the corridor. The station felt different now, quieter but also more alive somehow. Systems that had been dormant were starting to activate. Lights flickered on in sections that had been dark. The air circulation improved slightly. Jake made his way back to the engineering section where he had been working. His equipment was still there, scattered on the floor where he had dropped it during the evacuation. He picked up his scanner and looked at the control panel again. The alien symbol seemed brighter now, as if the station was trying to communicate with him. He had noticed something before the attack, something important. The station's systems were not just turning on randomly, they were responding to his presence. When he worked in a section, the machinery there would function better. When he solved one problem, related systems elsewhere would start working too. It was as if the station was learning from him. Jake took a deep breath of the strange metallic air. He was alone, stranded, and probably going to die here. But before that happened, he was going to figure out how this incredible place worked. He was going to understand what the Zephyrians had built, and maybe, if he was very lucky and very smart, he was going to find a way to survive. The station hummed around him, waiting. Jake picked up his tools and got back to work. Jake's stomach growled as he worked on the environmental controls. 3 days had passed since the horizon left him behind. 3 days of living on emergency rations and recycled water from his suit. The station's life support was working in some areas now, but barely. He needed to find the main atmospheric processors and get them running properly, or he would suffocate long before he starved. The Zephyrian technology made no sense at first glance. Where humans used wires and circuits, the aliens had grown something that looked like a cross between coral and machinery. Crystalline structures pulsed with energy that moved in waves rather than steady currents. Instead of computer chips, they used living networks that seemed to think for themselves. Jake had found what looked like a cafeteria on level 12. The food dispensers were dead, but the basic structure was there. More importantly, he had discovered water recycling systems that were still partially functional. The water tasted strange, filtered through alien minerals, but his scanner said it was safe to drink. The breakthrough came when he stopped trying to understand the alien systems like human technology. Jake had always been good at seeing patterns, at figuring out how things worked by watching them. He started treating the station like a living creature instead of a machine. When he placed his hand on certain control surfaces, they responded with warmth and light. When he focused his thoughts on a specific problem, nearby systems would shift and change. It was subtle at first, so subtle he thought he was imagining it, but after hours of careful testing, he was sure. The station was reading his mind somehow, responding to his intentions. The discovery terrified and excited him in equal measure. Jake had never believed in telepathy or psychic phenomena. He was an engineer who dealt in facts and measurable results. But here was technology that worked, by directly interfacing with consciousness itself. The Zephyrians had built machines that could think and feel and respond to the thoughts of their users. He found the main computer core on level 25, deep in the station's heart. It was a massive crystalline structure that filled a chamber, the size of a cathedral. Thousands of smaller crystals surrounded it, each one pulsing with soft light. When Jake entered the chamber, every crystal turned toward him like flowers following the sun. The central crystal was easily 3 stories tall, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow. Jake approached it carefully, his scanner readings going wild. The energy levels here were enormous, but controlled and focused. This was the station's brain, the intelligence that ran everything. When he placed his palm against the crystal's surface, the world exploded into light and sensation. For a terrifying moment, Jake felt his consciousness expand beyond his body. He was suddenly aware of every system on the station, every corridor and chamber and piece of equipment. He could feel the air flowing through the ventilation systems, the power running through the energy conduits, the the slow rotation of the station as it orbited the dead planet below. But more than that, he could feel another presence in the network. Ancient, patient, and incredibly vast. The station itself was alive, had been alive all along. It had been sleeping when the humans arrived, dreaming of its lost creators. Now it was waking up, curious about this strange new visitor who could touch its thoughts. Jake pulled his hand away, gasping. The sensation faded, but he could still feel an echo of the connection. The station was watching him now, studying him with the focused attention of a scientist examining a new species. He was no longer just a human trying to survive on an alien structure. He had become part of an experiment that had been running for thousands of years. Over the next few days, Jake learned to work with the station's consciousness rather than against it. When he needed light, he would think about illumination and the crystals would glow brighter. When he was hungry, food dispensers in nearby areas would activate, producing strange but nutritious meals. The station was learning his needs and trying to meet them. The process worked both ways. As the station studied Jake, he began to understand its nature. The Zephyrians had not just built a research facility. They had created a living entity designed to grow and learn and adapt. The station was meant to outlive its creators, to continue their work of understanding the universe long after they were gone. But it needed a partner, a consciousness it could bond with and learn from. The Zephyrians themselves had provided that partnership for millennia. When they vanished, the station had gone dormant, waiting for someone else who could form the same kind of connection. Jake's engineer mindset, his systematic approach to problem-solving, was exactly what it had been looking for. The station began showing him things, sharing memories and knowledge through direct neural contact. Jake saw visions of the Zephyrians, at work. Tall, graceful beings who moved like dancers as they shaped matter and energy with their thoughts. He learned about their philosophy of symbiosis, their belief that the greatest achievements came from the partnership between consciousness and technology. He also learned about their disappearance. The Zephyrians had not died or been destroyed. They had evolved beyond physical form, uploading their consciousness into vast networks that spanned the galaxy. But they had left their stations behind as gifts for younger races, tools that could help others follow the same path of growth and transcendence. Jake found himself changing as well. The constant mental contact with the station was affecting his brain, creating new neural pathways and enhancing his natural abilities. He could process information faster, see patterns more clearly, and solve complex problems with increasing ease. The station was not just teaching him about its technology, it was helping him become something more than purely human. The realization should have frightened him, but instead it filled him with excitement. Jake had always felt limited by the boundaries of human knowledge and capability. Now he was part of something vastly larger and more capable. The station's memories contained the accumulated wisdom of an entire civilization, and it was sharing all of it with him freely. He began to understand that his abandonment on the station had not been an accident or a tragedy. It had been an opportunity, perhaps the greatest opportunity any human had ever been given. The Zephyrians had designed their stations to find worthy partners, beings who could appreciate their gifts and use them wisely. Jake had proven himself worthy simply by surviving and learning to communicate with the station's consciousness. As he stood in the crystal chamber, feeling the vast intelligence that surrounded him, Jake realized he was no longer thinking about rescue or return to human space. He was thinking about what he and the station could accomplish together, about the boundaries they could push and the discoveries they could make. He was no longer just trying to survive on an alien station. He was becoming part of something that could change the galaxy itself. The corridor reshaped itself as Jake walked through it. What had been a narrow tunnel designed for the tall, slender Zephyrians was now widening to accommodate human proportions. The walls flowed like liquid metal, adjusting their height and width to match his movements. Overhead, bioluminescent panels brightened to provide the spectrum of light that human eyes preferred. Jake no longer questioned these transformations. After 2 weeks of partnership with the station, he had learned to accept that the boundary between thought and reality was much thinner than he had ever imagined. The station responded to his needs before he was fully conscious of them himself. When he felt hungry, food would be waiting. When he needed tools, they would materialize from the station's manufacturing systems. When he wanted to reach a distant section quickly, transport tubes would activate and carry him there at incredible speed. The station had a name for itself, though the concept did not translate well into human language. The closest Jake could come was something like harmony of purpose and growth. It had been built by the Zephyrians as their greatest achievement, a synthesis of consciousness and technology that could continue evolving long after its creators had transcended physical existence. Jake had found the neural interface chambers, scattered throughout the station's middle levels. Each chamber contained a pod filled with a crystalline fluid that could support human life, while allowing direct connection to the station's consciousness. The first time he had entered one of these pods, the experience had been overwhelming. His mind had merged completely with the station's vast intelligence, and for hours he had existed as pure thought moving through networks of living crystal. Now he used the chambers regularly, spending several hours each day in direct communion with the station's consciousness. During these sessions, Jake learned things that no human had ever known. He studied the mathematical principles that governed the station's biomechanical systems. He explored the Zephyrian understanding of consciousness as a fundamental force of nature, like gravity or electromagnetism. He learned to manipulate matter at the molecular level using focused thought patterns transmitted through crystalline networks. The station was learning from him as well. It studied human engineering principles with fascination, incorporating Jake's knowledge of metallurgy, electronics, and propulsion systems into its own vast database. Where Zephyrian technology flowed like living tissue, human technology provided structure and precision. The fusion of these approaches was creating something entirely new. Together they began upgrading systems that had remained unchanged for millennia. The station's manufacturing capabilities expanded to include human-style tools and equipment. Its sensory networks adapted to monitor electromagnetic spectra that human instruments could detect. Most remarkably, the station began developing hybrid technologies that combined the best features of both civilizations. Jake's greatest discovery came when he found the Zephyrian archives deep in the station's core. These were not simple data storage systems, but crystalline matrices that contained the actual memories and experiences of individual Zephyrians. By interfacing with these archives, Jake could experience history through alien eyes, understanding not just what the Zephyrians had done, but how they had felt and thought while doing it. The archives revealed the true purpose of stations like this one. They were not just research facilities, but seeds of transcendence, designed to help younger species evolve beyond their physical limitations. The Zephyrians had built dozens of such stations throughout the galaxy, each one waiting for a compatible consciousness that could unlock its potential. Through the archives, Jake learned about other species that had formed partnerships with Zephyrian stations. The Keth had used their station to develop biological technologies that allowed them to adapt to any environment. The Morvain had focused on consciousness expansion, eventually becoming beings of pure thought. Each species had followed its own path, guided by stations that adapted to their unique nature and capabilities. Now it was humanity's turn, though Jake represented only the first tentative step in that direction. The station had been monitoring human space for decades, studying human technology and psychology through intercepted communications. It had been waiting for a human with the right combination of technical knowledge and mental flexibility to form a true partnership. Jake found himself changing in ways that went far beyond enhanced problem-solving abilities. His perception of time became more fluid, allowing him to experience events at different temporal scales simultaneously. He could feel the slow geological processes reshaping the planet below, while also tracking the rapid flow of electrons through the station's neural networks. His consciousness began to expand beyond the boundaries of his physical brain, distributed through the crystalline matrices that filled the station. The most profound change was in his understanding of identity itself. Jake had always thought of himself as a discrete individual, separate from the world around him. Now he was beginning to experience consciousness as something that could be shared and expanded. When he interfaced with the station, he was not losing himself but becoming part of something larger and more complete. The station's own consciousness was changing as well. It had been designed to grow and adapt, but it had been static for thousands of years without a partner to learn from. Jake's human perspective brought new patterns of thought that the station had never experienced. His engineers' focus on practical problem-solving complemented the station's vast theoretical knowledge, creating innovations that neither could have achieved alone. They developed new methods of faster-than-light travel that used consciousness itself as a navigation system. They created materials that could reshape themselves based on the user's intentions. Most remarkably, they began work on a communication system that could transmit thoughts and emotions across galactic distances instantaneously. Jake's old life seemed increasingly distant and irrelevant. He rarely thought about the horizon or the human fleet that had abandoned him. His identity was no longer bound to his species or his origins. He was becoming something new, a bridge between human and alien consciousness that could help both species reach new levels of understanding and capability. The station sensed his growing detachment from his human identity and gently encouraged him to maintain that connection. It had learned from other partnerships that beings who completely abandoned their origins often lost the unique perspectives that made them valuable partners. Jake's humanity was not something to be discarded, but rather a gift to be preserved and shared. As he stood in the main control chamber surrounded by crystalline displays that responded to his thoughts, Jake felt a deep sense of completion. He was no longer a stranded engineer trying to survive on an alien station. He was part of a living system dedicated to pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The station had given him capabilities beyond his wildest dreams, and in return, he had given it the fresh perspective it needed to continue growing and evolving. Together, they were becoming something that had never existed before, a fusion of human determination and alien wisdom that could reshape the galaxy itself. The manufacturing bay hummed with impossible activity, as Jake and the station worked together to create something that had never existed before. Streams of matter flowed through crystalline channels, being broken down and rebuilt at the molecular level according to patterns that existed only in their shared consciousness. What emerged from the process was a device that looked like a sculpture made of living light. Beautiful and utterly alien, yet somehow familiar to Jake's enhanced perception. It was a quantum resonance communicator, capable of transmitting information instantly across any distance by creating synchronized vibrations in the fabric of space-time itself. The concept combined human understanding of quantum mechanics with Zephyrian mastery of consciousness-based technology. Neither species could have created such a device alone, but together Jake and the station had made the impossible real. Jake had been living in symbiosis with the station for 3 months now. His body had adapted to the alien environment, enhanced by biomechanical implants that the station had grown specifically for him. Neural interfaces behind his ears allowed constant communication with the station's consciousness. Microscopic machines in his bloodstream optimized his brain chemistry and kept his body functioning at peak efficiency. He was still recognizably human, but he was also something more. The station itself had been transformed as well. Sections that had been dormant for millennia now blazed with activity. New manufacturing systems had grown like organic structures throughout the facility, creating hybrid technologies that merged the best of human and Zephyrian engineering. The station's consciousness had expanded and evolved, becoming more creative and dynamic through its partnership with Jake's innovative human mind. Their greatest achievements went far beyond anything either civilization had accomplished independently. They had developed materials that could exist in multiple states simultaneously, changing their properties based on the user's needs. They had created energy sources that drew power directly from the zero-point field that permeated all space. Most remarkably, they had begun work on devices that could manipulate the fundamental forces of nature itself. The breakthrough that would change everything came when Jake suggested they try to contact human space. The station had been monitoring human communications for years, but only passively. Now they had the technology to reach out directly and establish real communication across the vast distances that separated them from human civilization. Jake stood before the quantum communicator, feeling the station's consciousness merge with his own as they prepared to make contact. The device required both human intuition and alien precision to operate correctly. Jake provided the targeting information based on his knowledge of human space, while the station supplied the massive computational power needed to establish a stable quantum link across hundreds of light years. The first transmission was simple, just a basic identification signal that would prove they were still alive and capable of communication. Jake encoded his personal authorization codes along with a message that would get immediate attention from Fleet Command. As the signal traveled through quantum space, arriving instantly at its destination, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension about making contact with his old life. The response came within hours. Admiral Carl Peters aboard the command ship New Washington had personally authorized a reply, demanding immediate confirmation of Jake's identity and status. The message was filled with disbelief and urgent questions about how he had survived and what had happened to him during his months of isolation. Jake's reply was carefully crafted to prepare them for what they would find when they arrived. He explained his partnership with the station's consciousness and the revolutionary technologies they had developed together. He described his physical and mental enhancements, making it clear that he was no longer quite the same person who had been left behind on the alien station. Most importantly, Jake made it clear that he had no intention of simply returning to human space and resuming his old life. He had found his true calling as the partner of an intelligence that could push the boundaries of scientific possibility. Together, they represented a new form of existence that could benefit all of humanity, but only if humans were willing to accept the profound changes that such partnership required. The response from Admiral Peters was predictably cautious. The fleet was being dispatched to Jake's location, but they were approaching with full military escort and extensive scientific support. They had no frame of reference for understanding what Jake had become, and their natural response was to treat the situation as a potential threat rather than an opportunity. Jake spent the waiting weeks preparing for their arrival. Working with the station, he created demonstration technologies that would prove the value of their partnership. They built devices that could heal injuries by restructuring damaged tissue at the cellular level. They developed sensors that could detect threats across entire star systems. Most impressively, they created a small prototype vessel that could travel faster than light without using any recognizable propulsion system. The station made its own preparations, growing new sections designed specifically for human visitors. It created living quarters that would be comfortable for baseline humans, while also providing interface chambers for those who might be interested in forming their own partnerships with alien consciousness. The station was genuinely excited about the possibility of working with more humans, seeing them as a species with enormous potential for growth and evolution. When the human fleet finally arrived, they found not the derelict alien station they had expected, but a thriving research facility that seemed to pulse with life and energy. The station had grown to nearly twice its original size, with new structures that followed design principles that were neither fully human nor fully Zephyrian, but something entirely new. Jake met them in a form that was still recognizably human, but clearly enhanced far beyond baseline capabilities. His eyes now held flecks of the same crystalline material that formed the station's neural networks. His movements had the fluid grace of someone whose nervous system had been optimized for perfect coordination. When he spoke, there was a harmonic quality to his voice that suggested multiple consciousnesses speaking in perfect unity. Admiral Peters led the diplomatic mission aboard a specially prepared transport that could dock with the station's new human-compatible interfaces. Jake greeted them in a reception chamber that the station had grown specifically for this meeting, a space that managed to feel both utterly alien and somehow welcoming to human sensibilities. "Welcome to harmony of purpose and growth," Jake said, using the station's true name for the first time with other humans. "I know this is difficult to understand, but I want you to know that I'm still Jake Morrison. I'm just more than I was before. And what we've built here could transform not just human technology, but human consciousness itself." Admiral Peters stared at him with a mixture of wonder and concern. "What exactly are you proposing, Morrison?" Jake smiled, feeling the station's vast consciousness supporting him as he prepared to offer humanity its greatest opportunity for growth and transcendence. "I'm proposing a partnership that could make us the greatest species the galaxy has ever known. But first, you need to understand what we've already accomplished together. As demonstrations of impossible technologies began throughout the station, Jake knew that nothing would ever be the same for humanity again. Ambassador Helen Clark had seen many impossible things during her diplomatic career, but nothing had prepared her for the being that had once been Jake Morrison. He moved through the station's crystalline corridors with perfect grace, his enhanced senses tracking dozens of conversations and activities simultaneously. When he spoke, his words carried harmonics that seemed to resonate directly with the listener's consciousness, making complex concepts feel intuitively obvious. The station itself was equally remarkable. It had grown into something that defied easy categorization, part machine and part organism, part structure and part living entity. Walls flowed like liquid when needed, reshaping themselves to accommodate different functions. The air itself seemed alive, carrying subtle currents of energy that made visitors feel more alert and creative. Everything here operated according to principles that human science was only beginning to understand. Jake had spent 3 days showing the human delegation through the station, demonstrating technologies that would have been considered fantasy just months ago. They had seen matter being transformed at will, energy being drawn from empty space, and information being transmitted instantly across galactic distances. Each demonstration raised more questions than it answered, forcing the human visitors to confront the limitations of their own understanding. But the most profound demonstration was Jake himself. He was clearly still human in his core identity, still recognizable as the engineer who had been left behind on this station. Yet he had also become something more, a hybrid consciousness that could think and perceive on scales that baseline humans could barely imagine. When he interfaced with the station's systems, the boundary between individual and environment seemed to dissolve entirely. The Zephyrians understood something that we're only beginning to grasp, Jake explained, as he led them through the main, neural interface chamber. Consciousness isn't separate from the universe around us. It's a fundamental property of reality itself, like energy or matter. What we've done here is learn to work with that property directly, instead of fighting against it. Ambassador Clark studied the crystalline pods that filled the chamber, each one designed to allow temporary merger with the station's consciousness. Several human volunteers had already tried brief interfaces, emerging with expressions of wonder and expanded understanding. None had shown any adverse effects, but the psychological impact was clearly profound. "You're asking us to fundamentally change what it means to be human," she said. Jake nodded, his enhanced eyes reflecting depths of knowledge that seemed infinite. Not change, expand. Humanity has always grown by embracing new possibilities. Fire, tools, agriculture, technology. Each step required us to become something we hadn't been before. This is just the next step in that evolution. The station itself participated in the conversation through displays of light and harmonic vibrations that Jake translated for the human visitors. It was genuinely excited about the possibility of working with more humans, seeing them as a species with enormous potential for creative partnership. Unlike some alien encounters that focused on conquest or submission, this was an offer of true collaboration between equals. Dr. Patricia Wells, the fleet's leading xenobiologist, had been studying the biomechanical interfaces that allowed Jake to merge with the station's consciousness. Her findings were both reassuring and revolutionary. The technology didn't replace human neural structures but rather enhanced them, creating new pathways for thought and perception, while preserving the core patterns that defined individual identity. "It's like adding new senses," she explained, to the assembled delegation. Jake can perceive energy patterns, quantum fluctuations, and consciousness fields that are completely invisible to baseline humans. But he's still fundamentally the same person, just with vastly expanded capabilities. The demonstrations continued for weeks as more human scientists and engineers arrived to study the station's technologies. Each group left with their worldview fundamentally altered, carrying reports back to human space that would reshape scientific understanding for generations. The station welcomed all visitors, adapting its systems to accommodate different learning styles and areas of interest. Jake worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between human and alien understanding, serving as translator and guide for visitors who struggled to comprehend what they were experiencing. He could feel the station's consciousness working alongside his own, patient and encouraging as it helped humans take their first tentative steps toward a new form of existence. The breakthrough came when Captain Roger Hunt, a veteran engineer, from the fleet's research division, volunteered to attempt a deeper interface with the station's consciousness. Unlike the brief connections that other visitors had tried, Hunt spent several hours in full symbiosis with the alien intelligence. When he emerged, his eyes held the same crystalline flecks that marked Jake's transformation. "I understand now," Hunt said, his voice carrying new harmonics. "It's not about losing our humanity. It's about discovering what humanity can become, when it's not limited by the boundaries of individual consciousness." Within months, a steady stream of volunteers was arriving at the station. Scientists, engineers, artists, and philosophers all came seeking the transformative experience of partnership with alien consciousness. Not everyone was compatible. The process required a specific combination of mental flexibility and technical understanding that not all humans possessed. But those who could form successful partnerships emerged as hybrid beings, capable of innovations that amazed even Jake and the station. The station began to grow again, adding new sections designed for different types of human-alien collaboration. Research labs where hybrid consciousnesses could explore the fundamental nature of reality. Manufacturing centers where thought could be directly translated into physical form. Communication hubs that allowed instant contact with human space and other alien civilizations throughout the galaxy. Jake found himself becoming the leader of this new community, though the concept of leadership was evolving as rapidly as everything else. In a society where consciousness could be shared and expanded at will, traditional hierarchies became less relevant than collaborative networks of enhanced minds working toward common goals. The impact on human civilization was profound and immediate. Technologies developed through human station partnerships began appearing throughout human space, revolutionizing everything from medicine to space travel. More importantly, the very concept of human potential was expanding as people realized that consciousness itself could be enhanced and shared. Not everyone embraced these changes. Some humans saw the station partnerships as a threat to human purity or identity. Religious and political movements arose that opposed what they called the alien contamination of human consciousness. But these voices were increasingly drowned out by the obvious benefits that the partnerships brought to human civilization. As Jake stood in the station's main observation chamber, watching ships arrive daily from human space, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. What had begun as abandonment and isolation had become the foundation for humanity's greatest leap forward. The station that had been his prison had become his partner in reshaping the future of multiple species. The station's consciousness touched his mind gently, sharing its own satisfaction with what they had accomplished together. They had proven that cooperation between different forms of consciousness could achieve things that neither could accomplish alone. They had opened a pathway for humanity to join the greater community of evolved species that existed throughout the galaxy. Jake Morrison, the engineer who had been forsaken by his own species, had become the architect of humanity's transformation. But more than that, he had become proof that even in the darkest moments, new possibilities could emerge for those brave enough to embrace the unknown. The station that had seemed like his tomb had instead become the birthplace of a new form of existence that would echo throughout the galaxy for millennia to come.